Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, comment allez-vous? Welcome to Vive la France. I'm sitting at my little cabaret table this morning, having a nice cup of French coffee. Magnifico. Reading this fabulous little article from San Diego Home and Garden Magazine. Anyways, I'm reading this great article about this guy named Gary Walker. He's called the Tree Whisperer, and I guess this was a feature article, quite a large spread in this well-known magazine on oaks. Apparently he's a specialist in endemic native species of California oak, so it's a fascinating read. You can find it on his website at greentreeworld.com by clicking the articles tab. Now, first of all, thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Tree Whisperer. This morning, we're going to be setting up the scene for doing some work that I've already started in a beautiful oak grove in Southern California. Wow. And you hear the church bells ringing. That's got to be a good sign. Oaks are my absolute favorite tree. Respect. They are the ultimate tree of planet Earth. They say that oaks grow 100 years, live 100 years, and die 100 years. Beautiful, beautiful tree. High tensile strength, graceful structure. And so we're going to be working in an oak grove a little bit later today. Now, in considering working in this oak grove, I always feel very reverent. And so I have to look at the Thinker by one of the great patron sons of France, Pierre-Auguste Rodin. It's an iconic piece. It's part of a much larger piece, a huge bronze doorway called the Gates of Hell, in which he has a number of seminal and iconic pieces that were later made famous individually as well. So I like to think of the Thinker representing the head. And then I had this beautiful, graceful ballerina here, which I like to think of as representing the heart. And so the head and the heart are the yin and yang of life. And that's how I approach my work with trees. So in other words, if we have principle without love, it's like a jellyfish. And if we have love without principle, that's not going to work either. It has to be the right combination of both. No, let me fix that one. Principle without love is like an iceberg. Thank you. Love without principle is like a jellyfish. And that's the way it is. So I like to combine both the head and the heart, the intellectual and the intuitive, when I work with trees. And so we're going to be getting into this job a little bit later today. I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the Tree Whisperer. And I'm just going to finish up reading this wonderful little article here. A lot of great useful information. And while I do, you might just want to enjoy the scenery here. It's gorgeous, fabulous Italian cypress, the pastoral setting, the mountains, the sky, of course the lavender fields, and in the principle of color optics we have complements of purple and yellow, and so it was very well done. So I'm going to be taking my leave now. À tout à l'heure, mesdames et messieurs. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Tree Whisperer. I'm Gary Walker, Master Arborist, otherwise known as The Tree Whisperer. And we're up in North County, San Diego. We're in a beautiful, large piece of property that features a number of gorgeous Engelmann oaks. Now, Engelmann oaks are very rare. Probably only 3 to 4% of the oaks in California are actually Engelmann oaks. In marked contradistinction to the coast live oak, which is the Quercus agrifolia. That one is fairly common, but the Quercus engelmanni is kind of rare. So you'll notice has a very different, heavily ridged type of bark to it. The architecture of these trees is very, I like to say, kind of Dr. Seuss-ish. They're very unusual. They have an awful lot of character. So we're just going to go on kind of a mini magical mystery tour this morning. We laced out 6 of these beautiful trees. They'd never been touched before. The owner here loves her oak trees, and so she gave me a call. We came over, we figured out a plan. So Nate the Great's working the camera again this morning. He does a great job. He's going to follow me around. We're just going to individually acknowledge each tree. So we're going to go here. You probably notice I have a feather in my cap, so whenever I see one on the ground, I just saw this one right here, I got to keep it. You know, I love raptors and owls and all of that. So okay, so here's the other one here. You can see this one's really pretty, has a nice kind of like wide open arms, just welcoming you, like wants to hug you, to give you some love. This tree was a little problematic. It had some bzzz. It had a beehive in the middle of it, which is not uncommon. Sometimes you'll find little beehives in the hollow of a tree, and there was a honeycomb in there, and of course the queen bee's hanging out in there, and she's got all of her millions of drones flying around. So we had to be kind of really careful here. Like the chainsaw, the rev of the engine excites the bees, so we had to use a lot of hand tools in this one here so as not to get them too ticked off at us. So that's this tree. We'll go over to another one. Okay, so Nate's just kind of like following along with his fabulous camera. This is another fabulous oak. And by the way, these oaks are really old. You know, I think they're all well over 100 years old. They don't get quite as big as a coast live oak, but they just, again, they have this incredible architecture to them. It's just so pretty, goes up and out. It has a lot of gnarly twist to it, just lots of character to it. It's fabulous. Also, the leaf on the Engelmann oak is more of an ovular, and it's kind of a greenish gray type of leaf. The one on the coast live oak has kind of like a holly, little points, sticky things on it, and it's a greener type of leaf. So this really is probably one of my very favorite oak trees here. Now, so we got that one. Then we have this beauty over here, and you'll probably notice there's a lot of big branches were cut there, you know, 6, 8, 10-inch diameter branches. If you can maybe get a bead on a couple of these, Nate, like you see this big branch. So part of what I did here wasn't not only lacing the tree out, but restructuring it. So it had some really big, gnarly branches coming down here. And so I just trimmed off a lot of the bigger branches and took it up and out to give it that beautiful cradling effect look that it has. So, and in fact, you can even see over there the wood pile. So we saved all the wood for the owner because that's fabulous burning wood. We never want to throw that away or grind it up. No. So that's this gorgeous tree here. Hey folks, so we're kind of like in the little red brick schoolhouse. We're just going to have a little basic tree anatomy since we're still over on this oak tree job. And we cut all of this wood up. We made hundreds of cuts so the owner could keep this incredible wood versus us chipping it up or getting rid of it or whatever. So anyway, so here's the bark. That's the outer layer. That's the equivalent of our skin. Underneath the bark would be what's called the cambium layer, which would be our vascular system. The center of this is called the heartwood. Now, we did this job a couple months ago, so it's already started drying out. You can see that the wood dries and splits radially in a radial fashion. So this is would be the hub of the bike wheel. These are the spokes, and this would be the rubber tire. And you can literally see, aside from the cracks, that all trees are set up this way. It's called radials. Very, very tiny lines. It's all part of its vascular system. That was discovered by my mentor, the world's greatest arborist, Dr. Alex Shigo, my personal friend and mentor, who I worked with for a number of years directly. He was the former chief scientist of the U.S. Department of Forestry. Many of his books are used worldwide in ag schools, universities, teaching about tree anatomy, botany, that type of stuff. So he taught us about virtually everything that we know about trees for modern technology, for tree understanding. So now let me just flip this around a little bit, and then, so Nate, you can see this here. So this was a wound, whether it was a tear or a branch ripped off. And so Dr. Shigo taught us that trees compartmentalize. The acronym is called CODIT, C-O-D-I-T, which stands for compartmentalization of decay in trees. So when a tree gets a wound, it compartmentalizes. You see how it's kind of curved and it rolls in here? That's called callus wood. Forms a barrier, a protective barrier. And you can see this was the cambium layer or the vascular system underneath the bark. And you can see bugs have already started to try to eat into there. But if you look at the cross section here, you can see there's also a little bit of a barrier zone here as well. So it's a great protective mechanism that trees have so that they can live extremely long time. So here's another one right here. You can see same thing happened here. It's callus wood is rolling in on it there, and you can even see how it goes into here. That's all compartmentalized now, so it kind of just forms a protective barrier. Now let's look over here, and you can see all of the hundreds of pieces of wood that we cut here. And this wood is very hard, burns very slow, kind of like mesquite wood. It's just a great burning, produces a lot of BTUs, very high heat. So you'd start your fire with a softer wood first, like a poplar or pine or something. Then you put your hardwood on top of that, get a nice fire going all day long. Okay, so a house is a house. Everybody has to have a house. We humans live in houses. Birds have to have houses. So here's this totally cool birdhouse. Comes from Germany. Now the reason I know that is because the owner told me. I picked it up to move it, and this thing is like really heavy. It weighs a ton. It's made out of concrete, and it's super well made. It's like it will last for centuries. And the hole or the orifice is just the right size so that the little brown house wren will fit into there. The house wren is that beautiful little songbird that comes every spring. And so they come to the same little birdhouse every year. And it's really interesting how nature designs that. So the orifice is just big enough for that bird to go into, but not a bigger bird of prey to go into. So anyways, these are really cool little birdhouses. I think you can buy them online. They come from Germany. All right, so come on, Nate. Let's go look at this tree here. This one was in really bad condition. This one was by far the worst of all of the trees here. It had some very serious die-off issues, a lot of dead wood. Probably it was 40% dead. So you can see a lot of the leaders on the top. Unfortunately, we had the blunt cut, which I normally don't like doing, but because there was so much dead wood in this tree, it was either remove it or try this experiment to save it. So I think we're going to save it. I deep root fertilized all of the trees. The lady owner is very vigilant about following my watering schedule. She loves her oaks dearly, and so we're going to try to bring this one back. And you can see, you know, it's got a really old, mature trunk. It's got a number of really huge leaders coming out of the ground, the basal root node. And it was probably, you know, would have looked like some of the other ones over here, but at some point it just got overwhelmed with stress, either through dehydration or whatever. Then the bugs came in, and it was under siege. So we're going to hope that we can turn this thing around and turn it into a, you know, somewhat viable, beautiful oak. Now come on in, step into my office here. Okay, this is Mr. Engelmann Oak. Meet the viewers out there in viewer land. Okay, so this is the sixth and the last one here. This one, as you can tell, is you know, maybe a half or a third as a few of the other ones we saw. It's still a beautiful oak. It needed a lot of work. It was totally overgrown, branches all intertwined and mixed into each other. So I've got the architecture and the beauty and the lines coming out now. And again, we fertilized it, and she's giving them a once-a-month deep soak to help them improve on the health. We're going to go wrap this up over at my favorite oak tree over here. I'll see you in just a second. You can tell this tree is so big, mucho gordo. This tree is so fat, that little skinny me can hide behind and you won't even know I'm there. Anyways, this was probably my favorite one on the property. I really like it. Gorgeous tree. And it's huge. Look, I'm trying to give it some love. I can barely get my arms around this thing. So Anyways, this is an acorn. Now, obviously it's a little too big to have come from this tree, but it is an acorn nonetheless. It's an oak acorn. Which brings me to the idea of something called the acorn theory by the noted author James Hillman. So the acorn theory goes like this. Basically, just like all seeds, really, whether they're citrus, any type of fruiting seed, but the acorn theory means that within the seed is the entire universe. Within the seed is everything that it needs for its unfoldment and completion into full totality, self-actualization, and full realization. So, and James Hillman brings that home for people in our lives, you know, as we move through time and space and we try to evolve as people. And sometimes we get in our own way, so to speak, but nature is much purer. It doesn't have those constructs that we seem to have as people that would throw wrenches into the spokes of our lives. So the acorn is a very pure vehicle, has everything in it from this little thing to turn it into this gorgeous, fabulous oak tree that will live for centuries sometimes. So remember, the adage or the axiom really is that oaks grow 100 years, they live 100 years, and they die 100 years. So they have a really long, beautiful life cycle, and they're to be respected because of that. It's always voted perennially as America's favorite tree. It's known worldwide, historically and contemporaneously, as one of the greatest, if not the greatest tree in the world. And we have many lessons that we can learn from the oak tree, and in particular, the acorn.